Welcome everybody. Today I am going to attempt to show you how to upgrade your Melzi board from your Duplicator V1, V2 and V2.1 to a kind of a hybrid R.A.M.P.S board. I'm going to show you how to install the stepper motors, how to wire it up to the power supply. I'm not going to show you how to install the BLTouch today because unfortunately my sensor is still in Germany, which sucks, but I will have to get through that. And I will not be using the extended heat bed board because that is also in Germany and is still on its way here. So once they arrive, I'll update the video or I'll make a new video to show you how to install it. So far what we've got is we have the LCD display, because we can't use the original Wanhao LCD display with Marlin, unfortunately. It's got a couple of connectors as well as a board that attaches to our R.A.M.P.S board. We have our hybrid R.A.M.P.S board, which is a R.A.M.P.S and Arduino all in one. So instead of having to muck about two different boards, we only have to muck about with the one. Thankfully this has got nice little screw connectors, so we don't have to worry about detaching any wires or having to put Dupont connectors on there. We've got our inputs for our power here, which can accept 12 or 24 volts, which is a nice addition. It's got all the chips on there. We don't have to worry about capacitor issues like with the original 1.4 R.A.M.P.S, which I think is quite good. There are plenty of schematics for this board on the company's website. Their documentation is a bit lacking, or it's in Chinese, but it's a pretty simple board. It's got a standard USB connector, it's printer USB, which hopefully I can find a cable for so I can show you how to flash it. It's got this little reset button here as well. Some of the other items we've got is we've got the stepper drivers. Now the company that I bought these from on Amazon, which I will provide a link for, has nicely included some heat sinks. Although the manufacturer for the R.A.M.P.S board does state that we shouldn't have any heat issues, it's best to be safe. So to get started, what we need to do is, first of all, we need to have our Wanhao box here, our control box. You need to make sure it is not plugged in. If it is plugged in and you're trying to do this, then that's just asking for trouble and you're going to get yourself electrocuted and possibly even killed. And we need to flip it over just to expose some screws. And I can't show you, but there are 4 screws on the back of the control box. Using the same Allen key, we want to take those ones out first, so let's do that. Once the 4 screws from the back are out, you want to look on the bottom of the control box and you'll see that there are these thicker screws which we don't need to touch. These hold the power supply onto the bottom. And then you've got 7 smaller screws which we need to remove in order to gain access to all the components. That's all 7 screws out the bottom and all 4 screws out the back. So if I just rotate this now, if you hook your cable out, you can move this plate off to the side. And what you want to do is just slide this backwards. So you see the side of the control box isn't moving, but you can slide the top off, and this has the power supply, so be very careful because you don't want to damage any cables, and just make sure you slide it out until the power supply can come off and to the side, like so. As you can see, we've got all our cables here. We've got our power supply, we've got the main plug and switch. I'm just going to move this over for you. You can see here, this is our Melzi board here. And this board allows our printer to pretty much do everything, as I'm sure you know. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to check to see whether any of your cables have labels. When I first took this box apart, they had no labels, and I made sure to put some on. But if yours does, that's great, you can get on with this faster. If it doesn't, if you notice on the board itself, I'll try and move these cables here. On the board itself, you can see it has these markers down the side here, telling you, for example, your X motor, your Y motor, your Z motor, and what I've done, I didn't have any labels at the time, so I just got a piece of paper, wrapped it in tape, and wrote on there what connector was what. One thing to note is when they ship these from the factory, they do glue the male and female ends of the connectors together to stop it coming apart during shipment. You can try and pull the connectors out with this glue still there, but you might end up damaging the board, which is not advised. So you might want to get a sharp knife and just try and remove it, or sometimes you can, if you've got nails, you can pick the glue off with your nails. But once you're labelled up and you're sure that you've got everything labelled, what we want to do is just start slowly, after removing the glue, removing each connector. So we have our Z motor, our Y motor, our two Z-axis motors, we have our extruder motor. As you can see, they come out quite easily. Once the glue's gone, you shouldn't have any problems removing them. We want to remove our main power, and this one can be a bit stiff. We want to remove our hotbed, and then we have our fans, and our hot end as well. And then we've got our stops. So we've got our Z stop, our Y stop, our Z stop, and our bed temperature sensor. And then the last one is the extruder temperature. Now see, I pulled this one out and I've actually damaged the cable. Or not damaged, I've pulled the connector out. This isn't going to be a big issue because we're going to be sticking these into new terminals. So if you do accidentally pull one of these out, don't panic, you haven't broken everything. So what we can do now is we can actually move all of these wires, and this is just the control box with the Melzi board and the LCD display, and this can now go in the bin. Or you can save it and maybe build your own 3D printer down the line using this board and LCD, as they will still work without any problems at all. So as you can see now, what we're left with is this lovely mess of wires. Hopefully you've labelled them. As you can see, some of them don't need labels. They've got, for example, hot end. I'm not sure if you can see that on the camera because the camera is not great. But so we've got a hot end, we've got our fan connector. So hopefully you've got them labelled and moved out of the way. First thing we're going to do is we're going to grab our R.A.M.P.S board. Sorry about that. We're going to grab our R.A.M.P.S board and install our stepper drivers onto it. You may be asking, can we use the enclosure for the new board here? Unfortunately, you are going to have to 3D print your own enclosure. Our board will not fit in the enclosure, or it will fit, but it doesn't have the holes. You could technically drill some holes, make some holes. That's entirely up to you, but I plan to 3D print an enclosure. I haven't seen many designs on the Thingiverse, so I will design something, a small enclosure for this to go into, and stick it up there for everyone to use. I will stick it up there for everyone to use. The first thing we want to do is make sure that we have our board here, and I will say for purposes that you're supposed to, when handling any kind of electronic board, you're supposed to wear an ESD strap, preferably on an ESD mat as well. I have a mat, but it's too big for the surface and my strap has broken, so that's no point me using those. If you don't have either of these, what you can do is touch a metal surface like the frame of your Wanhao, just to ground yourself and prevent any static build-up causing ESD damage. So as you can see, we've got our board here, and the first thing we want to do is we need to add some jumpers to these pins here to let it know that we want to use 1/16 steps per motor, which should hopefully make our printer quieter. I'm not sure if it increases the accuracy, but we can go from there. And what you want to do is just get your little computer jumpers, and you want to install them in the first 3 pins. So there's four sets of pins, and you want them on the first 3 sets. Okay, so as you can see, I've got it installed on the first 4 driver mounts. We don't need to do it on the 5th driver mount. In fact, we're not going to use the 5th driver mount. That's mainly if you're looking to hook up, for example, a dual extruder, but we don't need that for now. So the next step is we want to get our stepper drivers out, and you'll see that they have this small chip here and the POTS regulator here, and this has to go into the board in a specific way. So the POTS has to go on the right side of the board, and to do that you'll see it's got these little pins, and they should slot right into the connectors over the jumpers that we've just installed. And once again, we only need 4 of them. So once we've got the 4 stepper drivers installed, what we need to do is we've got these little heat sinks, and the manufacturer has been kind enough to include some adhesive tape on there, and you just peel it off and stick these on the main chip of the stepper driver. It can be a bit fiddly. So as you can see, that is our 5 stepper drivers installed with the heat sinks on top. Okay, so what we've got here is we've got our main control board, and we've got our wire bundle here, and what you need to do is find the power connector. It's got power written on it, and on the bottom you will see 2 screws. They're flathead screws, and all we need to do is just undo those to remove the cables from the connector. Now we've got on the board here, we've got our 12 volt in and our ground. So this is our 12 volt in, this is our ground. You may find that the connectors themselves, so you see they've got these metal connectors on the end, don't fit in the holes. In which case you just get a pair of wire cutters and just cut the cable, which I'll do now. And just say you can remove these little black plastic things, so we can put them on after. So as you can see, you don't need too much cable. You only need enough just to get into the terminals, and once you've cut it, you just twist these around, make sure they're tight. And on the board itself, you'll see we've got the 2 screw connectors again. So we just undo those, and we put our 12 volt in. And screw that down. And our ground. Okay, something I've just remembered is, as you can see, I've taken one of the stepper drivers out, and I'm going to remove the jumpers as well, because the way the board is wired is this is actually your first extruder, this is your second extruder, and then we've got our axis motors here. So what we want to do is move this stepper driver from here to the end. That's how your board is supposed to look. So you've got your extruder and then your 3 axes. Okay guys, so after the stepper driver has been correctly installed into the right position, so we've got extruder 0, extruder 1, and then our axis here. We want to get our extruder motor cable, and you'll notice that on one side of the cable is black with no markings, and the other side of the cable is black with markings, and you want to install this into the terminal the exact same way with the cables facing up. And just as before, on the back there are these screws that you can undo. I would advise you undo only 1 or 2 at a time and install them into the stepper driver screws here. So I'll do that now. So as you can see now, that is our extruder motor hooked up with the markings on the upper position here. And next we need to do our x-axis, our y-axis, and our z-axis. Now these are a little bit more difficult. As you can see, they've got these white connectors on them. Now you can push the pins out, but the pins won't fit. So the easiest thing to do is to cut and strip the cables and slide them into each terminal. So we're going to start with our x-axis, and I'll get the x and y done and stop there. So as you can see, I have the extruder motor, X motor, Y motor hooked up. Now with the Z motor, it's pretty much the same thing, but with our Z motors we have 2 Z motors, so we need to disconnect both of these and put them both, or set both sets of wires in these holes. So I'll do that now. So as you can see now, we have our power, we have our extruder motor, we have our X motor, our Y motor, and both of our Z motors hooked up. Well, the next thing we can do is we can hook up the LCD display. So this has got a couple of components to it. So we've got the LCD display, which has got a lovely little turn dial. It's got a speaker, which we will probably have, or I will disable because it is noisy and annoying. You do have to remove the little white sticker. It's also got an SD card slot, so when we make our enclosure we can make a hole for that. That allows us to print via SD card, and we've got the 2 connectors on there that allow us to connect it to this board here. Now in order to use the SD card we have to use the 8-pin header here, which we get a little board with it, as you'll see here. And this little board literally sits over the top of these, just like so. So we'll do that now. Just like that. There we go, just make sure that's sitting flush. And you'll see on our cable here we have EXP1 and EXP2. This is EXP1 and this is EXP2, and it gives us the cables in the packet as well, just to connect these up. So that's the LCD display hooked up. We don't need to touch anything else there. So that's the LCD hooked up. The next thing we want to do is we want to hook up our fan. This is the extruder fan. So what you need to do is grab your other cable. It's not that one. That's the hot end. There we go. There's the fan. And once again, just on the bottom, disconnect the two screws. Remember, your red is your positive. Take those out and put them into the two screw terminals. We've got the fan plus and the fan minus at the end here. The next thing we can do is hook up our heated bed. So you want the hot bed, and once again same thing, got the two screw terminals, just undo those. And they go into the bottom of the board here. You've got the BED bed, or BDE as it's written on the board. And I'm going to have to strip these. And then the last one that we want to hook in after we've got the bed in is our hot end. Now we've got hot end 0 and hot end 1. We want to plug this into hot end 0. So now that that's installed, you should only have about 5 cables left. That's your extruder temperature, your bed temperature, your Y stop, your X stop, and your Z stop. Now, I know I said that we wouldn't have to use DuPont connectors, but I was wrong because the connectors will not fit. So unfortunately you're going to have to strip them and put 2 pin header Dupont connectors on there. I will do that now. I would recommend you look online on how to do these because they can be quite a nightmare. So as you can see now, we have all of our connectors plugged in. We've got our extruder motor, X-axis, Y-axis and our 2 Z-axis. We have our 2 temperature sensors for the extruder and for the bed. We've got our hot bed. We also have the thermistor, the heater element for our extruder, as well as the fan and our main in power. And we have our X stop, our Y stop and our Z stop. So that should be it for getting the board configured with the hardware. Now we just need to switch over to the computer and do the firmware.